Hello friends, in this video we'll be taking a look at the autosomal DNA, predicted phenotype, traits and GEDmatch results of an orangutan from the University of Zurich in Germany. When it comes to appearance, this is what she is predicted to look like. With my NOSHACOT tool, she's predicted to have dark brown color eyes, Greek-shaped nose, and black hair. Keep in mind that NOSHACOT and various other tools I've developed for human genomes, not necessarily for gorillas, orangutans, chimps, or whatever else. For eye shape, her eye shape prediction says that she has very sub-Saharan African eye shape. She doesn't have blue eye haplotype 1 or any of the blue eye haplotypes that follow. Nothing is surprising here because these are mutations that are exclusive to Eurasians. Not even just all humans, but only Eurasians have BEH1 and all the other blue eye haplotypes. And she actually does have some light color variants in SLC24, SLC45A2, OCA2, and ASIP. She's got some light color variants, but what's interesting is she doesn't have any light color variants in TIRP1, unlike gorillas and chimpanzees who do have some light color variants in TIRP1. And this orangutan also does not have East Asian EDAR, so if this was a human, you would say no East Asian facial traits, but she's a female, and female orangutans look pretty different from male ones. The biggest difference is the lack of, the incredible cheekbones, but I would say that male orangutans actually do kind of look East Asian. This is what she scores with MZLPK23B. This is a very typical score for any ape, like gorilla, chimpanzee, orangutan. They all score 95% plus archaic human, but I want you to look at this and compare this to my gorilla videos or the chimpanzee videos. There's a difference. And the difference is that gorillas and chimpanzees score 98-99% archaic human, whereas orangutans score 95. And then as you go further and further from chimpanzees and gorillas in terms of, closeness, as you go into baboons and macacas, their percentage of archaic human basically decreases. And then you go into like just completely unrelated species such as wolves, you get a very low percentage of archaic human and more of the other stuff. So it seems to be that archaic human is this kind of component that peaks in gorillas and chimps, and the closer you are to gorilla and chimp, the more you're gonna score archaic human. With MDLPK16, she's mostly scoring the ancestor component, which was actually meant to represent either Neanderthal or Khoisan genetic drift. I'm not really sure. It peaks in both Neanderthals and Khoisan people, who are South African hunter-gatherers, and with the oracle she's getting more as a mixture of Khoisan people from South Africa plus African Americans, so a mixture of black plus black basically. With the Eurogenes K13, once again very black result, 68.8% Sub-Saharan African, and a little bit of North European, a little bit of Oceanian as well, and you see this with the oracle. This is what she scores with if you helix K10 plus French, so she does score a little bit of French, but she is mostly scoring Khoisan and Pygmy, so she's mostly scoring these kind of South African components. And this is what she scores with if you helix K10 with Japanese. As you can see, she's also scoring a little bit of Japanese, so there is affinity to both Europeans and East Asians. However, this is still mostly a very sub-Saharan African result. It's obviously not a sub-Saharan African because it's not even a human, but out of all human groups, it is closest to South African hunter-gatherers and basically sub-Saharan Africans. Now we're gonna take a look at her traits, which you will find with my genome analyzer tool, which you will find on my website. The website link is in my channel description, so if you go to my channel and you read the About Me page, you will find a link to this website where you will find my genome analyzer. So she's got G-gene COMT-SVAL-MET variation, which means VAL-VAL genotype, or warrior genotype, which means less dopamine. Basically quicker dopamine reuptake, more COMT enzyme activity, and COMT enzyme is the enzyme that breaks down dopamine, so more COMT activity means you have quicker breakdown of dopamine, less dopamine in the system. TT here, which leads to lower activity of the MAOA enzyme and slower breakdown of dopamine. So this is the opposite. These two genotypes, they essentially accomplish the opposite. What they do is the opposite of the effect is the opposite of these two genotypes. So for example, this one decreases the amount of dopamine, and this one increases the amount of dopamine by this one decreases the amount of dopamine by increasing the activity of the COMT enzyme, and this one increases by decreasing the activity of the MAOA enzyme. These two enzymes are both enzymes that are implicated in the breakdown of dopamine, but these are two completely different genes. So COMT is on the 22nd chromosome pair, MAOA is on the X chromosome, so these are completely two different genes, and profile is not determined. GG here meaning less dopamine D2 receptors and decreased risk of schizophrenia. Well, we can say that this one and this one, they kind of go together. So most likely, if I had a complete coverage file for this orangutan, most likely she would have the European no-go learner mutation in Pro which is kind of crazy. I'm not really sure. I don't want to. I might eat my words on this, so I can't really make these predictions. Because these linkages and these phylogenies exist in human genomes. So for humans, if you're a human and you have GG here, I could make the assumption that you have AA in Pro as well. I can do this imputation, I can make this assumption. But if you were a monkey, then you can't really make this assumption. They have different phylogenies and they have completely different, order of mutations. So for her, I might retract my statement about her having no-go learner variants. For dopamine receptor D1, typical genotype here leads to lower likelihood of autism. This is the typical genotype for humans. And actually, this sucks. So she wasn't genotyped for this variation in TAC1, which is very interesting. Typically we can make the assumption that she has AA here, because most monkeys have A1A1 genotype, which means AA genotype, and which leads to less dopamine D2 receptors. But this file was a little bit incomplete, and this information is not in the file, unfortunately. But we kind of know what it is, because it's a pattern you will observe with every monkey or ape. TT here, which is a typical genotype for most humans and leads to short form 5-HTTLPR. Short form 5-HTTLPR is a typical phenotype for pretty much everybody watching my video. Most of you have TT here, most of you have short form 5-HTTLPR, which leads to a slightly increased risk of depression and trouble with transporting serotonin. So it's actually rare to have long form 5-HTTLPR. It's actually rare to have the genotype that protects you against depression. And little fun fact about me is I have the protective genotype, so I have a much lower risk of depression based on my genotype here. But most of you are gonna have TT, just like this orangutan. Most of you are gonna have TT here. For lactose persistence, doesn't have the European lactose persistence mutation. Nothing is surprising here. For the empathy gene, GG here, which means higher levels of empathy. AA here means higher levels of empathy, and TT here, which means lower levels of empathy. Interesting. So I think orangutans do have a lot of empathy. Orangutans are, they're not violent. They don't like tear each other's faces apart. It's mostly chimpanzees that are violent and sociopathic. Orangutans tend to be pretty kind, and yeah, I guess they do have higher levels of empathy. For diabetes, AC here, which leads to slight decrease in the risk of type 1 diabetes. That's kind of crazy. So this variation is the most important variation for type 1 diabetes for humans. The most important variation. And the fact that she has AC here means there's variance in orangutans. That means there's some orangutans who have AA, there's some orangutans who have AC, there's some orangutans who have CC. That means there's variance in orangutans in this variation, which means it's possible that some orangutans might have type 1 diabetes. Maybe I'm stretching it, and there is some other genotypes they have that really protect them from type 1 diabetes, because I've never heard an orangutan being treated for type 1 diabetes. But the fact that she has heterozygous genotype here means there's some variation in her species when it comes to this variant. When it comes to this variation, I haven't made video in 2 days, so I'm kind of getting back into it. For hemochromatosis, does not carry on any of the hemochromatosis mutations. For Alzheimer's, these two are the most important ones, and she's not genotyped for anything here. Myopia, AA here, which is the typical genotype for most humans and leads to increased risk of myopia. But basically what it is there is a G allele here, and the G allele is greatly reducing the risk of myopia for some humans. But most of us have AA. Most people don't have the G allele. It's pretty rare. So most people actually have a slightly increased risk of nearsightedness or myopia if you just look at this variation. What about this variation? This leads to a decrease in the risk of myopia. Well, I don't think orangutans or any of the other monkeys have myopia. I don't think it's a monkey illness. For miscellaneous section, no micro P. I'm not going to pronounce this in full. If you aren't paying attention, maybe you can pause the video and read it. But I don't want to pronounce this because of monetization. So TT hair, which leads to smaller cranium and lower IQ. AA hair, which leads to 8 points lower IQ than individuals with GG genotype. So 2 genotypes for lower IQ and smaller brains. And AA here, which means 2 fat gene variants in FTOs. Interesting. So she's got fat gene. She's got the fat gene. Quite interesting stuff. What about Zyprexa? Less likely to gain weight if taking Zyprexa. Higher odds, less likely. So it's kind of inconclusive for Zyprexa. Kind of inconclusive. What about albinism? Not a carrier for albinism type 2. Not a carrier. Not a carrier. Not a carrier. Not a carrier. And not a carrier for Melanesian blonde hair variants. So it seems that she is just not carrying any of the typical albinism or Melanesian blonde hair variants that are implicated in these phenotypes in humans. And for cleft palate, the genotype is not determined. She does not have this information in her file. Well, that's pretty much all there is to this orangutan. Thanks for watching until the end. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. You can download her genome in 23andMe format from link which is in the description. Goodbye.